wanted to. But we have finished up to chapter 5 Bhagavad Gita. So the whole of Bhagavad Gita can be divided broadly into three sections. The first section speaks about primarily Karma Yoga. The middle section primarily speaks about Bhakti Yoga, and the last one third of Bhagavad Gita primarily speaks about Jnana Yoga. So we finished the fifth chapter. I've uploaded it, and I thought let me do a quick recap of what we have covered so far. The first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, is pretty straightforward. There is a description of the battlefield, the different warriors, their conch shells. There's a dialogue between Duryodhana and his teacher Dronacharya. There's a dialogue between King Dhritarashtra and his secretary Sanjay. Then we see the entry of Arjuna and Lord Krishna. And then the second half of the first chapter is pretty much a monologue by Arjuna, where Arjuna, upon seeing his relatives with whom he had to fight, he gives 5 reasons why he cannot fight, why he thinks it's not a good idea to fight his own blood. So that's the first chapter. And the next chapter, second chapter, the first 10 verses pretty much, it's Arjuna's lamentation again. It's Arjuna's confusion, and he finally decides that he is not going to fight. But he also, at that point, he takes shelter of Lord Krishna, who was his charioteer. And from that moment onwards, when Arjuna takes shelter of Lord Krishna, Krishna begins to play his role as Arjuna's teacher, spiritual master. And we find then the rest of the Gita is Lord Krishna's advice to Arjuna. Second chapter, a major chunk of second chapter is Sankhya philosophy, which is the analysis of matter and spirit. Well, the word Sankhya means basically analysis, but in this case it's analysis of matter and spirit, body and soul. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you say that you don't want to fight because these are your relatives, but who are you? First, be clear about your identity. If you think you're this body, you are a big fool, because you are not this body. You have had several bodies before this birth, and you will continue to have several bodies after this birth. So don't be identified with the body. You are an eternal spirit soul. So that section talks about the nature of soul. It talks about reincarnation, rebirth, and so on. So after hearing that, Arjuna says, he asks some questions. Basically, Lord Krishna says the material world is made of duality. So a person who is not identified with the material body, but who is identified with the spirit soul, he is in a platform of equanimity, where he tolerates the dualities of the material world, because that's the nature of the material world. So whether it's heat or cold, success or failure, such a person is equanimous. So Arjuna asks Krishna, you're speaking about a sthita pragya, or a person of steady intelligence. Tell me how to identify such a person. What are his qualities? So that's how the second chapter ends. Now we come to chapter 3, 4 and 5. I'm clubbing all these chapters 3, 4 and 5 together because I personally find these 3 chapters confusing. The primary theme of chapter 3, 4 and 5 of Bhagavad Gita is Karma Yoga. It is said in different verses, it is said in different angles, different perspectives, but over and over again, Lord Krishna is stressing on Karma Yoga. So I'm going to now speak a little bit overview about chapter 3, then chapter 4 and 5, so that we understand. As I said, I personally felt confused. I had to read it over and over again to come to this point. So the gist of chapter 3, when the chapter 3 begins, Arjuna asks a question. That's how the chapter 3 begins. In the second chapter, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, Durena hyavaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya. O Dhananjaya, O Arjuna, keep away all abominable activities with your buddhi yoga. Now Arjuna interpreted this in meaning that Krishna wants me to avoid all abominable action. In this case, the abominable action is the war. All these bloodshed and killing and violence is abominable. It's very bad. So Krishna wants me to avoid all these activities, and with the buddhi yoga, stay in buddhi yoga. So Arjuna is asking Krishna, do I understand you right? You want me to stop this activity and retire, renounce, and do my spiritual sadhana or meditate and become a Gyana yogi? Is that what you want? That's Arjuna's question. So Krishna clarifies. He says, no, Arjuna, that's not what I meant. He says, why Arjuna has to do karma? He's a warrior, he's a Kshatriya, and he's a Grahastha. Therefore, the scriptures have specified duty, prescribed duties for such a person. Therefore, Arjuna has to do his prescribed duties, and when he does that over a period of time, he will become purified. When he is purified, only then he will be eligible to receive the transcendental knowledge or jnana. So Lord Krishna says, he gives some reasons why Arjuna should not prematurely retire or renounce. The first reason is that the nature of the soul is to be always active. The soul can never be passive. Therefore, if such a person, a living entity, prematurely gives up activities and sits and meditates, it's going to be a fiasco, it's going to be a failure, because the nature of the soul is to be active. Therefore, meditation is not recommended, at least premature meditation is not recommended. Number two, when you prematurely meditate, you take up sannyas. Renunciation means sannyas. You take up sannyas, you wear the orange robes, you take the danda. Outwardly, you're a sannyasi, but inwardly, you're not purified enough. Therefore, the mind will dwell on sense objects inwardly, and outwardly, you're a sannyasi, which means there's a duplicity. You're a pretender. Okay, so that also is not good. Therefore, the best path of action is to do one's prescribed duty as given in the Shastras, in the scriptures, and then become purified, and then attain jnana, and then you are mentally renounced. Okay, so that's the Nishkam Karma Yoga. So Lord Krishna is stressing karma over jnana, action over knowledge. Then Lord Krishna said, you know what, Arjuna? Every living entity on this material world is using all the bounties of nature. You're getting rain, you're getting sun, you're getting air, you're getting earth, you're getting vegetation, all these. How do you think these come to you? See, there's no free meal. Nothing is free. You are using all these nature's materials for sustenance. You're eating. But these are provided by demigods. Now, demigods are servants of Krishna. So, Krishna has put these demigods in charge of these various material things. Therefore, they're providing you with all these. So it is your duty to reciprocate, to give back to the demigods what they're providing. And how do you give back? Through yajna, through sacrifices. When you do sacrifices, the demigods are pleased, and then they will give you all these for your sustenance. But without sacrifice, if you just consume, you are a thief. And then Lord says, by the way, I am the supreme benefactor of all sacrifices. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram. I am the person to be pleased through yajna. Therefore, you can, instead of giving to demigods, if you offer to me, then all these demigods who are like my limbs of my body, they are naturally, automatically satisfied. So here we find a move from karma kanda to karma yoga. Karma kanda is when you do yajna for demigods in return for some favor. So Krishna says from that he moves to karma yoga, and especially if you see verse number 30, third chapter, there's a direct shift. And let me read that verse to you so you will know what I'm talking about. In chapter 3, verse number 30, Lord directly says, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vikatajvara. Therefore, Arjuna, surrender all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desire for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fright. So Krishna is directly saying, surrender all your works to me. So before he was talking about demigods and how to please the demigods, then he shifts from karma kanda into karma yoga, and that's a highlight of third chapter. And finally, Lord says, you have to, when you act, so when you act without for me, without expecting any result out of your activity, when you are dedicating all the results to me, basically you are doing Nishkam Karma Yoga. So Nishkam Karma Yoga should be done by everybody. Even when you are sufficient, you are completely renounced, there's complete vairagya, there's complete knowledge, you're completely renounced, you're completely pure, purified. Still, you continue doing Nishkam Karma Yoga. Why? Because to set the right example for others. And he gives the example of King Janaka, who, in spite of being on the platform of Jnana, which is above karma, the platform of Jnana is above karma. So here's the yoga ladder: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So when you are in the platform of Jnana, which was what Janaka, King Janaka was, still he continued doing his karma to set a right example for others. So that's the gist of the third chapter. And not really. In the last part, Lord Krishna talks about lust. Arjuna asks a question to Lord Krishna, what is that force which forces you to act even without your desire? It's something like which pushes you towards sense gratification. Even though you know it's not good for you, but still there's something that pushes you. So Lord Krishna says that is lust. And then he says, what are the places where lust is seated and how to overcome lust. And that ends the third chapter. Moving on to fourth chapter. Fourth chapter is Jnana Yoga. Okay. And here Lord talks about the parampara system, how the transcendental knowledge has to be acquired not from books but by Guru Parampara in the lineage of succession. That's how the Jnana, transcendental knowledge, is acquired. And then Lord talks about himself, the divine nature of Lord Krishna, how his birth and his appearance and disappearance and his activities are all divine. A person who understands that is no longer needed to come back to the material world. So that's the divine nature of Krishna, which is mentioned in the fourth chapter. And then Lord Krishna talks about karma, how the intricacies of karma. He tells Arjuna, the karma is very complex, it's very intricate. Not everybody can understand it. So we often find this question, why bad things happen to good people? Somebody is so good, but then so much bad things happen to that person. That's because of the karma. We just know this lifetime. There are millions of lifetimes before. Okay, so there is some lifetime you do something bad, and it comes back to you with interest. That's how karma works. So, one doesn't need to know all the intricacies of karma, but one just needs to, as said in the previous chapter, surrender to Lord Krishna, and that's fine. Then Lord talks about how different sacrifices, and Lord says that the final the final the final what has to be achieved through sacrifices is jnana, knowledge. Knowledge is the final product of all the yajna. And then Lord talks about the glories of jnana. So the 4 chapters, jnana yoga, how to acquire jnana, what are the glories of jnana, and Lord talks about himself also. Moving on to the 5th chapter, which is the final chapter I'll be talking about today. This chapter again, Arjuna asked the same question which he asked in the 3rd chapter. So after hearing all this, Arjuna has the same question. Krishna, do you want me to fight or do you want me to renounce? Tell me very clearly, I'm still confused. So Arjuna is asking, should I take sannyas or should I stick to karma yoga? So here Krishna makes the point clear. Krishna doesn't want Arjuna to do sannyas of karma. He wants Arjuna to do sannyas in karma. Sannyas, as I said in one of my previous videos, can mean different things. It can mean the outward dress and all the symbols of the renounced order of life, sannyas. Sannyas can also mean renunciation. So Krishna says, you don't have to take sannyas as in the renounced order. You don't have to wear orange robes and all that. But while you're performing your action, have the attitude of renunciation, have the spirit of sannyas. When you have the spirit of sannyas, when you're doing an action, you don't desire for the end result. You don't feel proprietorship over the action. And a good example of this is a cashier in a bank. A bank cashier counts millions of notes, but he knows that he's just doing his duty. The notes don't belong to him. He doesn't have any sense of ownership for them. And he also doesn't desire that note. He's just counting the crores of rupees like a duty. And that's precisely what Krishna wants us to do when we do our duty. We don't have any ownership over the result, and we don't desire the result also. So it's a sannyas in karma, not sannyas of karma. So again, Krishna talks about Nishkam Karma Yoga, which will free us from the bondage of action and reaction. And finally, the 5th chapter ends with the glories of the liberation. A person who is fixed on the Supreme attains liberation. So that's the 5th chapter. I hope it makes some sense. So from 3rd chapter, 4th chapter and 5th chapter, there's a lot of overlap of concepts. I thought this video may make sense to you. If not, please write in the comment below. I'll maybe make one more video, or I'll go chapter by chapter. Thank you for watching. Hare Krishna.